So in the last video, I got to the point where I said something to the effect of contentment is the righteous response to God. Always. It's always the right attitude in every circumstance, in every situation. And I believe it's pretty easy to prove that with the Word, with His Scriptures. That if you're willing to do His will, He will make known to you those Scriptures. He'll help you to understand them. And listen, I'm not saying I understand them perfectly. I'm growing and learning just like you, and we're gonna keep growing. But I'm telling you, there's some things that just set me free from disillusionment. And anyway, to continue, in Philippians 4, and these are things that a lot of people that are, people have labeled them. Well, I'll just go on and read it to you, or I can't read it to you, I'm driving, but best I can quote it to you. But over in Philippians 4, Paul said a statement. He said, I've learned in whatever state I'm in to be content. That's not talking about Georgia, Alabama, North Carolina, South Carolina. That's talking about in whatever circumstance, I have learned to be content. I have learned to be satisfied. I have learned not to want. Because he was talking to some folks, and he says, I'm not talking about being in want here, because I'm telling you, I have learned. There's somebody pulling right out in front of me. Y'all don't do that to big trucks. It's crazy. But he said, I have learned how to be content. He said, I think he said, I've learned to be abased. That means to be without, to not have nothing. Now, Paul had times when he was without. And he said, I've learned to abound. At times he had. He said, I have learned to be full, and I've learned to be hungry. He said, I've learned to suffer need. You kidding me, Paul? You've been in need, you've been hungry, and you're the righteous servant of God who is given the opportunity to go up into heaven and see things that you can't even, not even allowed to share. Not even allowed to talk about those things, because evidently the Father don't want people to know what He's prepared for them. He wants you to trust Him. At any rate. And then he goes on to say, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. In context, that's what that verse is talking about. I have learned how to be without. I've learned how to be with. Any other thing, if you haven't learned that, you're living in discontent, and that is an affront to God. He does not like it. It is sin. When you're discontented with God, you are standing in the face of God, pointing your finger at Him. When you're discontent, let's put it that way, when you're discontent and you're griping and grumbling about your circumstance or situation around you, hard to swallow, I know it, but you are pointing your finger at God and you're saying, I don't believe you. I don't trust you. And that is a bad place to be. Because once you are in sin and living in that, then things begin to kind of crumble around you. There comes depression. There comes disillusionment. There comes, oh man, lies on top of lies, and you become trapped in that. It's a vicious place to be. He said, I have learned. So it must be that life lessons, and you're not going to have life lessons if you ain't experiencing life, right? You got to be out here living with the rest of us, and we have things that come our way that we experience, and they're not always good, but sometimes it's really good, right? Abased and abound. So Paul said in 2 or 3 places, he said, imitate me. Well, what was he talking about? In the principles he lived by, the Word of God that he lived by, imitate him. And Paul was in prison when he wrote this in prison. Most meager of circumstances. I assure you, the food couldn't have been good. The clothing couldn't have been good. Bad, just bad circumstance. If you've been in prison, some of you might have been. But at any rate, the satisfied person, in my mind, the content person, says, I'm satisfied with what God has brought about in my life. I'm satisfied. They don't want anything different. They don't want anything. Turn that CB off. They don't want anything different. They don't want anything more. They want what He wants for them right now. Because I'm telling you, folks, I've learned this, that right now is right now, always. Oh, and give it to the poor, the widows, and the orphans. See you in the next video.